I worked as a civilian employee for the British Ministry of Defence, which is the equivalent of the DoD here in the US. And I did many different postings throughout my 21-year career there. The one that is obviously I'm best known for is having run their UFO program. So I was on the so-called UFO desk from 1991 through to 1994. And my job was to research and investigate the phenomenon, to assess the defense, national security, and safety of flight implications. We didn't have a big program, so it was essentially just myself and administrative support. But that said, we had a network of people that we could bring in on the specific investigations. So that would include, for example, Air Force radar specialists, because whether or not something was tracked on radar was a big part of our investigations. Intelligence community imagery analysts, if we had photos or videos, and all sorts of other experts, meteorologists, astronomers, all the sorts of people that you would need to liaise with to try and see if there were any conventional explanations so that we could eliminate them. We got about 200 or 300 sighting reports each year, and after investigation, around about 80% of those could be explained as misidentifications of ordinary objects and phenomena. Around 15% insufficient data to make a firm assessment, and 5% unknown. Now with those 5%, of course, we didn't say, well, that's extraterrestrial, but neither did we rule that out. When I started that particular posting, I was pretty skeptical about the phenomenon. I knew very little about it, and I had no strong beliefs either way, really. But as time went by, as I read back through the archive of files going back decades, and as I investigated the newly reported sightings, I began to realize that there was something rather more than just misidentifications and hoaxes here, that we had a sort of hard core of these sightings consistently over the years, that structured craft displaying speeds, maneuvers, and acceleration that seemed beyond the cutting edge of our own aerospace tech. When I left that position, I think my key takeaway was, wow, there's something going on here, but we don't really have a good enough handle on it. And that's why I stayed involved with this subject in a private capacity now, but continuing my research and investigation, leveraging my position in government, because I stayed in the Ministry of Defence for some years after that particular posting. And of course, I'm still connected with a lot of people in the UK, government, military, intelligence community, but now I live in the US, connected over here as well. And I use that to hopefully advocate for this subject and to give people, particularly the media and the public, hopefully a sort of insider's insight into how we view and handle this subject from inside government. I took early retirement in 2006, and I have continued to speak on this subject. I often get called upon when a story breaks in the media to go on the evening news, talk about that, but also documentaries, and indeed going all around the world, speaking at conferences, giving lectures, sometimes to UFO groups, but sometimes to more government or scientific orientated audiences. This subject has come out of the fringe and into the mainstream in the last few years. And the start point of that, so far as the public is concerned, certainly, was December 2017, when the New York Times broke two related stories. One about ATIP, a US government program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that looked at UFOs, among other things. And secondly, the existence of a number of US Navy forward-looking infrared videos of UFOs taken from F-18 Super Hornets. Since that New York Times story broke, obviously the world's media followed suit, but also we've had revelation after revelation, development after development, and so, for example, NASA is now engaged on this and has published a study, but continue to help the wider US government initiative on this topic. We've had 2 reports from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. We've had several reports from the Pentagon. We've had, and I think this is particularly crucial, engagement from lawmakers. So in Congress, both in the Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats working together to try to force more openness and more accountability about this. And so we've had engagement from the Armed Services Committees, the Intelligence Committees, and also, of course, the Oversight Committees. And we've had classified briefings, but also some public hearings and more to come. The House Oversight Committee hearing was absolutely critical in pushing this subject to the point where it's got its critical mass, because these people were testifying under oath about the reality of this. So we had 2 retired US military pilots, David Fravor and Ryan Graves, talking about the safety of flight implications of this, and just talking about the extraordinary parameters of some of these craft. And then, of course, we had David Grush, who, again, Congress and the media has fact-checked his background. He was a member of the intelligence community, and he was assigned to the UAP task force. Now, UAP is what we in government call UFOs, unidentified aerial phenomena, now again rebranded to unidentified anomalous phenomena. But he was on the UAP task force, and he was basically directed to go and interview a whole bunch of people inside government to find out what we did and didn't know about this. And he came away, his takeaway was, wow, all these crazy stories, so we were told, that people have been telling for years about crash retrieval programs and reverse engineering programs. He said they're true. And there is what he described as a non-human intelligence interacting with us. And as a result of this, I mean, extraordinarily, the last few omnibus defense bills, so each year there's the National Defense Authorization Act, and we've had multiple UFO-related provisions in the Act. And although some of this material didn't pass, the so-called Schumer-Rounds amendment contained the phrase non-human intelligences 22 times. I mean, people find this extraordinary, but it's hidden in plain sight. You can go onto the US Congress website and read all this. It's not a secret, though parts of it, of course, are still classified. It was inevitable that there was going to be government pushback to all this, and indeed there was. And on March 8th, a very skeptical report from the Pentagon's UFO unit, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, dropped. And it basically poured cold water on a lot of these claims. And it was clearly trying to dissuade elements in Congress from taking this any further, and saying or implying they'd been duped by a small group of true believers inside the government. But Congress wouldn't have it. And just 4 days after that report dropped, 8 congressional representatives wrote to the House Speaker demanding the establishment of a permanent committee on UAP. So look, this doesn't surprise me. This has always gone on. There are factions within government when it comes to this. And what we're seeing right now is sort of, I characterize it as the Empire Strikes Back from the skeptical faction. But Congress isn't letting it go. There are going to be more hearings, and there are more classified briefings, of course, going on behind the scenes all the time. There have been a number of real heroes, I think, in Congress who've stepped up to the plate on this issue. And one of them is Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee. And I mean, just for people to see Tim Burchett sort of speaking on this issue side by side with AOC, of all people, and laughing and smiling, but seriously working together. It's a refreshing sight in these politically divided times, particularly in the run-up to what will undoubtedly be one of the most contentious, if not the most contentious presidential election in history. To see Tim Burchett and AOC working together, reaching out across the political aisle, setting aside their ideological differences and saying, look, whatever the truth about that, let's try and get some answers on UFOs. This is a great thing to see. And what I thought was particularly impressive about Tim Burchett was on one occasion when elements in the intelligence community tried to smear the name of David Grush by leaking to the media that he had PTSD, Tim Burchett stood up and supported him and said, well, look, the reason he has PTSD is that he served his country with honor and distinction in Afghanistan. And then Tim Burchett looked kind of with disgust at the sort of people who'd been doing this, and he said, you know, in Tennessee, we don't belittle people who've served and you know, for having PTSD. We thank them for their service. And so that was a very powerful statement. And these people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are not going to be scared off this subject. They're not going to be bullied by elements in the intelligence community or the DoD. And if anything, they're not backing down, they're doubling down and stepping back up. The politics of Arrow are quite complex. The now stepped down, of course, director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, by his own admission, didn't want the job. He was, as the saying goes, he didn't volunteer, he was voluntold to go and do it as his last posting prior to retirement. He, when he was in that position, gave the impression of being quite even-handed, to the point where he co-authored a paper with Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard. So that was encouraging. But then after he stepped down, he went on a sort of little unofficial media tour where he started to be much more skeptical. The new director, Tim Phillips, to a certain extent, of course, we don't yet know which way he's going to go on this. He's inherited the position of his predecessor. We don't know if he's going to get the job permanently. And so we're still in a wait-and-see mode there. I am very much encouraged by the recent developments in this subject. As I say, it's come out of the fringe and into the mainstream. I think it's always belonged in the mainstream, but it's had this pop culture baggage, which is partly because of science fiction, and it's partly because of maybe some more extreme conspiracy theories. And changing the language was key to changing the conversation here, I think. So that's why those of us in government rebranded this from UFO to UAP, so that we could have that serious discussion inside government. And that's where we are now. Now, as always, there are factions and there are different viewpoints. So government is not moving with a single common purpose here, and that's going to lead to some tension. And we're seeing that right now. But I am encouraged that things have moved the way they have, and I'm encouraged by what I see as progress which continues to be made. I had a TSSCI security clearance plus the need to know. So there are some things that I'm not able to discuss publicly. I can really only discuss matters which are either unclassified or which the government, whether it's US or UK, have declassified. That being said, I don't want to, when I say I know a few things I can't disclose, I don't want to imply that I'm sitting on some bombshell secret. Look, I don't know whether or not all these accounts are true. I have not personally seen or been briefed on a smoking gun. Well, I say I've not been briefed on it. I mean, various intelligence community people have told me that it's true, but I've not been able to verify that for myself. So I'm not one of these people that kind of smiles and says, I know a big secret, but I can't tell you. No, I don't know what that big secret is myself. Probably because when I was doing this for the British government, I think the feeling was that whatever the truth of this, if the answers lie anywhere, they do lie here in the US. And that, of course, was not where I worked. Sure. Well, here at the Ozark Mountain UFO conference, I am really among friends here, meeting up with some old friends, making some new ones. This is one of the longest running UFO conferences in the world. And this is about my 5th or 6th time here. I very much enjoy coming here to Arkansas and immersing myself in this event. It really is a very friendly conference and lots of fascinating things going on. I mean, obviously I'm here to give a presentation, sit on a couple of panels, but also listen to the other speakers and just interact with people. There's a real, what I sense going around here today, there's a real hunger for this subject, a real desire to, get to the bottom of this. And the people here, it's a vindication for them, because for years, I think even family and friends and work colleagues would just kind of give them a little smile and say, oh, you're off to a UFO conference. Well, now it's, oh, you're off to a UFO conference. I saw that Congress was doing something on that. Or I saw that there was a provision in the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024. What's going on? So these people were ahead of the curve. I think conferences like this play a very important role in informing and educating people about this. Obviously, this conference sees a lot of repeat attendees. There are people who come here year on year, and that's great. But really what I like to see is new people coming in and saying, well, wait, I heard about this, I saw something on the news, I read that Congress was doing hearings on it. I want to come and find out what's going on. So I think there's still people out there who don't realize all this is going on. And I think coming to an event like this is a chance to have some fun, but it's also a chance to really get up to speed on what's going on. Oh, there's much more, I think, energy and life in the conference scene at the moment. This conference is getting bigger and bigger year on year, but there are other organizations too, the Mutual UFO Network, of course, who have a presence here. In fact, the last speaker was from MUFON. And also Ancient Aliens, obviously the TV show continues to be hugely popular, but I'm also involved in Ancient Aliens Live, which is a 90-minute stage show based on the TV series with a lot of people's favorite contributors. And we've done, oh my goodness, we've probably done about 50 dates so far, touring all around the United States, and we regularly play to audiences of over 1,000 people each night. I think I've got 11 more dates coming up in May. So busy schedule because people are fascinated by this. And why shouldn't they be? Questions like, are we alone or not in the universe, and are we being visited, are some of the biggest and most profound questions we can ask ourselves as human beings. And I think there's a real sense that we might be on the verge of getting some answers, which makes it even more exciting. My presentation is a little bit different. I am going to be talking about potential dark side elements of all this, because one of the questions that arises is, if the US government is sitting on this great secret, why can't they just tell us? And so it's a sort of what if presentation. And I'm saying, what if there are elements of the phenomenon that are a little bit dark and might take us to some rather uncomfortable places, because there can be nothing classified about saying there's alien life. I mean, that in and of itself can't be classified under the definitions of classified information. So there must be something else. There must be part of the story or the backstory. And so I'm just going to maybe give people a little bit of pause for thought, because if it was easy to disclose, we'd have done it. And so if they are sitting on a great secret, we know it's not easy to disclose, and that does raise the awkward question of why. So it's going to be one of those speculative what-if presentations that I hope will give people, a few things to chew on. Researchers like Jacques Vallée have said, and his quote was, "If it just turns out to be aliens, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed." What he meant was that this phenomenon is so multifaceted and so changeable, and there are elements of deception that run through it. Not necessarily just deception from the government, but the phenomenon itself. I've heard the phrase, the cosmic trickster. It's as if the universe is playing a joke on us. And the more we find out about the universe, the less we know, in one sense. It's like, we look out into space with the James Webb Space Telescope. We see more things, but we find more mysteries. And I think there is an argument that there is not one single neat solution to the UFO mystery. And even if there is, it might not be, it's extraterrestrial. It might be something from other dimensions. I mean, theoretical physicists will tell you, in relation to string theory, for example, that you need the existence of multiple hidden dimensions to explain the equations. They won't work without them. And now we have the Large Hadron Collider, the huge particle accelerator in Europe, gearing up to try and find these hidden dimensions. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know, but people way, way smarter than me are getting very excited about this and increasingly begin to suspect that there's some fundamental truth about the universe that we just don't know, that we may have got an awful lot of things completely wrong. In a way, I think that's tremendously exciting, but it may make some people a little nervous, because what they're essentially saying is the world we live in and the universe that we live in, it isn't quite what we think it is. Well, the former Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, once famously gave a talk about unknown unknowns. And I think every time I look at the subject of UFOs, I'm reminded of that quote, because there will inevitably be unknown unknowns inextricably linked up with and part and parcel of the UFO phenomenon. So the UFO phenomenon may end up, firstly, being something that is solvable, but the solution may be something that we hadn't quite expected, or completely perhaps hadn't expected. It may tell us something fundamentally new and different about the universe, and it may tell us something new about ourselves.